Return to you it is I, the mental Dracolich of RPGs. Your main man comes to speak to you on the topic of a video request. A video requested by Joshua42425, and what he asked is how to run a game that takes place over hundreds of years. Now, when you're running a game that takes place over hundreds of years, brother, what you want to decide, there's kind of two different deals. There's the one game that just stretches on forever. You play this game for 7 years of real time, and things just have to happen. There's more and more, and it's just created a huge timeline. Okay, that's great. However, there's the other type, where you have devised you're going to have a game that takes place over 100 years. You can run a game, a one-shot in one night that takes place over hundreds of years. Now, let me give you a description of the first time I ever ran Vampire the Dark Ages, the very first scene in that game. We're talking about 1200 AD in England. That's where the actual game takes place. That's not where the first scene takes place. The first scene takes place at an undisclosed location. The characters are looking out from a large, and I go into the description of this tremendous boardroom with state-of-the-art, perhaps even futuristic electronic devices, lavish table, other various items and accoutrements. But what's most important is just the view, looking out onto the cityscape at night, the sea of cars going by and headlights and tail lights and bits of smog drifting amid clouds and moonlight coming down in this steel and iron jungle that expands and sprawls in every direction, and they are so very, very high, lofty, ascendant above it. Boom! They don't get to say a word. We cut right to their mortal life, right to the start of the game. I describe everything again in England. Now, their mind, they've been captivated, and they were all captivated, and they don't know what to do with that. But they got to get in characters. They got to run. They got to go with this deal, and they're playing the characters. So you're building them, and then you have to have key points. Okay, when these different things happen, they may be stimulated by NPCs, or a player just might get beat into torpor, or whatever happens that shifts it up, brings it back. Or in a game like, let's say, Vampire the Masquerade, which is a great game to do this with. You can also do it with War of the Apocalypse, but you have to do it a little bit of a different way. I'm going to tell you my idea for a War of the Apocalypse game. Now, that does not take place over hundreds of years. It takes place over a lot longer period of time. But let's look at Vampire. Let's look at hundreds of years. Vampires, one of the problems I have with a show like True Blood, which I really like True Blood, but as a Vampire in the Masquerade game, it would suck because they would all be dead. That's what you don't do. That's what the neonates that you used to know that are dead, that's the kind of shit they did. Because a vampire is glacial in its movement, so they take vast periods of time. If you're playing a vampire game and it's like, well, 1 week went by this game session, 2 weeks went by the game session, and something big cracked off each game session, you are fucking failing. You are failing. Vampire, you can have the posturing, the threatening, the stuff like that, or some small things moving. But the big things, the really big things, man, they come out like once a century, and you try to get away from them. Vampires are about preserving themselves. They're not about interacting with the conflict. That's what vampires that die are about. That's not what vampires that survive are about. Unfortunately, a lot of times that gets twisted, and people they just go the complete way the game is not intended to be ran. That is, from the design of the game, that's not what it is intended for. It is intended very much to preserve yourself. You're a parasite. Parasites don't run out there and try to be the hero. No, hell no. There ain't no hero fleas. Ticks ain't the hero. Ticks just want to get on that part of your body you don't see and just suck. That's what a tick wants to do. It doesn't want to get itched off. It doesn't want to have the fire put to it. It doesn't have an elbow drop, but it will. So build to big events, and you build a big event in the year 1200, and then you ask the player, okay, what are you doing? Oh, this, and no, what are you doing? Okay, and then you just do that. You can borrow that one, and it's back. It's the year 1350. And you're like, oh, what? And you go, okay, and then you hit the montage, just explain to them what they were doing. Like, take the things that they gave you, and weave those into a story, and then explain that, and be like, oh, and here, and you hit them up with some extra celerity and some extra potence. Maybe you hit them with some auspex. Maybe you hit them with a couple ranks of stealth, or an extra dot of strength. Some things are like, oh, so they're adjusting those things. They're getting it. They're listening. They're really attentive because you're keeping the pace there. And then maybe you go a long period, man. Like you play for like 6 months in that year, and a lot of stuff goes in, and then you hit it again, and you hit back to that 80s style montage. The montage is one of the greatest things ever done in movies. I wish they would use that technique more. I got kind of stigmatized, I think, but it's such a wonderful technique to build things up so quickly and to give you in an hour and a half long movie a story that would take an entire series of a television show to show. And you're like, okay, I can really get into that. Particularly when they hit, I guess, a movie where you got like 8 montages, you're like, all right, I can get with this. I like them. And I definitely like them in RPGs as well. And you can hit each one of them, and you can spotlight, and you might even, in the middle, there, even kind of like give them like that one scene, and then you can do this kind of deal, like you saw in the Highlander movies or Highlander shows, just for an example. There's plenty of other places as well, but the flashback, right? So we went forward, but also we can go back. Oh yeah, let's talk about that. And you can even set that up kind of cool. You'd be like, oh, and your character learns 3 dots of medicine. Well, I don't have no medicine. I don't say nothing about medicine, but that's fine. Just put them on your character sheet. All right, 3 dots. Characters, you ain't gonna have many characters argue with you by adding some shit to their character. Oh, some 3 dots of medicine. All right. And then, particularly once they figure out there's a story there, like, oh, because characters a lot of people wanted power, they wanted dots. But man, what they really want is that spotlight, that story, that cool factor. And then you can flashback, and oh, by the way, you're there with, Augustus Giovanni chilling up there, and he's teaching you this stuff, and maybe you taught him something too. So that is explaining, and you run this scene, and the scene might be like 2 hours long. You run it for them, or you might even do it away from the group, and they're like, oh man, that scene, and you could cut back and flashback so much stuff because you have so much time to play with them. Particularly if you have more open schedule, maybe you run a game on Fridays, but a guy like hits you up on Wednesday, like, man, play some Vampire tonight. You're like, hell yeah, let's play some Vampire tonight. And he said, well, how do we do it? Oh, don't worry about that. So you just devising this little flashback deal for him, and he gets it, and it's like, okay, yeah, that's great. And you keep little deals on the character sheet where that story isn't known. It's not really known to the player, but it might not be known by you, but it certainly might as well. Where you have that deal, like I said, look at Highlander, where they have all those flashbacks, and you're looking, and now you're like, oh, I get another piece of the story. Oh, I get another piece of the story. And the player really is the audience, so he's getting those pieces of stories about his own character. So it gives him a different pace, a different feel to the character, a different control and investment in the character by the game master, by the storyteller, and it gives them more of a sense of intrigue and interest. There's a mystery in their own character, which is something you so rarely get. And then you can cover all that time. You can also hit forward and backwards. You can run a bunch in this era, then flip forward to 1450, and then be like, oh yeah, but actually back here at 1360, we're going to do this, and then you run for 6 months at 1360, and they already know some shit that happened, but the character doesn't know it. So we show how do we go in there. It's like one of those movies that shows, or a book that tells you the end right in the beginning. A lot of Lovecraft stories like that. It has this how I'm going to say it, and then I'll really tell you the story. So you can do that, and very very successfully, because it gives such a different pace. And when you can give a different pace, man, the players, man, they're sitting on the edge of their chair, they're rocking and rolling because they don't know what to expect, and you can shift it up. You can give them that long period, then you can flip it, boom, 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 and go so many different years. And like I said, you can go forward. You don't just have to flashback. I mean, it can be a flashback, but for a prolonged period. For 2 years of gameplay. Not 2 years in the story, but 2 years of actual. You guys sitting there like, damn, what about that other stuff? Oh, don't worry about that. Or you can flash forward. See, that's another way you do that. That Wednesday night, the guy comes by, he plays a vampire. Oh yeah, but this is what happened the year 1618, by the way. Oh, 1618. So it requires, of course, if you've jumped them up, well, they're not dead. But then again, it's not like a story. The character doesn't need to be dead. You can know the character lived, but what had happened? And maybe he got jacked. Maybe horrible things happened. He's all torpor for 800 years. He's like, oh, that was a jack to me. So you gotta build to it. This is definitely a very advanced storytelling technique. And you need a very good memory to do this, and probably should take a lot of notes, because you're going to be interacting with scores of characters. But you can also interact with characters over the years, and you can have great deals come up. Like you can have the frenemy. He's your tag team partner one week, but then the next week, which is 400 years later, you guys are bitter rivals, and you might not have explained it. You're like, oh, well, that wasn't my best friend. What's he doing now? Oh, well, let's flip back to that story. And it could go on and on, playing over the skate, making time flexible and fluid. It doesn't just have to be linear, like it is in our world, like it is for real. It can be at your whim. Time is controlled by the Game Master, much like so many other aspects. It is part of your preview as Game Master to dictate when. You understand? So do. And the players, man, they will get on board. They will love it. I tell you what, I did, man, the players loved it. Oh yeah. They were into that deal. So if you do that, it's going to expand over. You can go into the future. You can go into other areas. Now, let me give you the idea I'll have for a Werewolf the Apocalypse campaign. And one of my players, the most curmudgeon man in the world, the man with man-like intelligence, my man Nosferus Kinsinners Nugulus Kinsinnerstein Sinersky. That's it. He has even said, man, that's the best idea I've ever heard for a role-playing game for someone to run a campaign. And this is my idea for Werewolf the Apocalypse game. And I said, man, you guys are going to have to really work for this one. It's going to take a lot of work on the player's part to do this game. To basically, werewolves have a trait called past lives. You kind of like look back and get the acceptance of the spirit and so forth. And I was like, okay, so what if we expand past lives a little bit more and just make it just like straight up reincarnation? That was you. Okay? And werewolves start off in the very beginning of time, the very beginning of like humanity, maybe before, maybe after. It's debatable, but we start with those first wolves, that first pack, those first individuals. You are those guys, and now you're these guys, and now you're these guys, and we tell the entire story of the werewolves from the very beginning to the apocalypse, to where there are no werewolves left, or perhaps to something that happens to come afterwards, And how does that play? How does it affect? What were you? How were you saved? When did you fall? When did you rise? When did you make the sacrifice? And of course, like I said, it makes dozens of characters, and it would be about often a game master is making characters, or them making characters. Like, okay, everybody make a rank 4, or you make a rank 5, you make a rank 1, you may because it's different roles to be played. It's not can have nothing at all to do with balance. It can be different aspects. It's like as if you're this group. They might not all be there, and you might even play multiple souls. It's like, okay, this time it was these guys' story, this time it was these guys' story. It weaves and intermixes differently. And it gives you, of course, as a game master, you're on this horrible season. Because you're dropping the hammer, like, oh, you got killed. Maybe we come back and you do something later tonight, but, or maybe you probably wouldn't go because you ain't playing anymore tonight because, we're doing this deal. And we're running, and that old school kind of brutal mentality of, no, you're not going to slide, you're going to get sorted out. And that can be real interesting to characters because they're like, oh, I don't have to go home and not get to play anymore. So they're making clever decisions. They're making interesting decisions. They're making often no cinematic decisions. They're like, well, fuck it. If I go home, I'm going home with a cool ass story. So you can think of different mentalities and with different characters and bring a lot of very much believability to it. You tell the entire story, and you can do things like the past life spirits. You can do things like notebooks that they find that are like 200 years old, maybe like modern day, and they find this like 200-year-old diary, and they're triggering these memories, and like, oh, I remember that. And it might even be character A finding character B's notebook, right? It's not their past life, but it's something else, and it references them, and they have flashes and memories that you're stimulating while player B is almost taking a game master role and describing, oh, and by the way, this and this isn't a diary, and telling scenes and telling stories from a diary, and the diary itself might be a scene that was never played, characters that were never played. You just hand it to him and go, oh yeah, by the way, I need you to do X, Y, and Z, so you come up with that as part of your deal, and you run that little deal for him, and by the way, I will interject and run what's triggering in his mind. I'll give him his flashbacks, and then we'll come back to him, and he'll soliloquy out how he's reacting to what you're telling him, to what I'm telling him, to what's coming, and you can really have some very adult, very intense experiences of RPG production that way. So those are two different games, two different ways that you can go about that. You can run this sort of scenario with many, many, many different games. You can have ageless and immortal characters in pretty much any type game you might like. Of course, it's going to have that introduction. It might not work well in Cyberpunk, but you might be like, well, actually, we had this story where, I'm this guy who was, whatever. You can run in Marvel or a superhero type game, let's just say, where you're playing someone like Vandal Savage, and you're like, well, actually, I'm older than humanity. I'm a damn caveman. So what's good now? I've been around forever. And you could flash that character back, and you could just tell some amazing stories right there with that character, how he's interacting and how he's manipulated the machinations of the world over so much time, and the choices he had to make, the times he's risen up as the hero, the times he's played a role of the villain. I mean, think about, if you have a character, let's just say 10, 15,000 years old, he's going to have done a lot of different stuff. He's going to have had epiphanies and morality changes. He did not start here and come here and be the same dude. No, he has been 1,000 different lifetimes. He's changed so much. Because that's the nature. You're going to change. You're going to do different things. You're going to try different things. You're going to interact in different ways. So that is my explanation of hundreds of years or even thousands of years in the past. You should have gotten a snack.